Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, with a live stream today to talk about three different subjects that are all a little bit different and hopefully interesting. One of the ones that I wanted to get on board and start talking about is well, there's three subjects. Number one, inflation, and Biden trying to claim that inflation, the horrible inflation number of 7.9% that it was hit today, was all Vladimir Putin's fault, which is just insane. Secondly, the government funding bill that the House passed last night, the Senate, they also passed an extension so the Senate wouldn't have to pass it until March 15th. So we're going to have a lot of talk over the weekend about the government funding bill. I want to talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, and this is just a little personal note, yay, Major League Baseball is going to be playing this year. So they came to an agreement, and we're going to have Major League Baseball. I think it starts on April 14th, full 162 games. So yes, Mike Trout will be playing, and hopefully he'll play more than 140 games this year. So we got Mike Trout going. That's a lot is good in the world, but let's talk about some of the things that aren't so good. Let's start with inflation because it's really, I just don't want to talk about it a lot, just a little. We had 7.9% inflation rate today. That's when Joe Biden took office in January of 2021. The inflation rate was 1.4%. Now inflation, 13 months later, is a whopping 7.9%. And yet Joe Biden in his statement today tried to call it Putin inflation because after all, it must be Russia's fault. Here's the problem. We all know that we've been having inflation grow since Biden became president. We know that in the middle of 2021, while people like we were warning about inflation, saying, wait a second, it's growing like a weed, we have to stop spending. Joe Biden kept spending, and he managed to, and he engaged in policies that cut off the ability for the oil industry to drill new wells. So we saw energy inflation going. We started seeing wage inflation growing, and now we have inflation that is rampant throughout the economy. The supply chain problems are still intact. The President Biden sees absolutely no reason to actually do anything that would increase domestic oil supplies. His answer is to try to import oil from Iran and from Venezuela, two regimes that grossly abuse their citizens, and which we have boycotted and effectively been in real economic warfare against for the last 10, 20 years. So his idea is, let's support regimes, give money, cash, to regimes that hate America and regimes that hate their own citizens and abuse their own citizens, as opposed to actually doing things like allowing us, really encouraging drilling in America. The answer that they typically have, that Psaki and others have had, is, well, there's 9,000 federal leases. Why aren't they drilling on them? And the answer to that is relatively simple. There's no financing to drill. The Biden administration has cracked down on trying to make everything a green investment. Anything that isn't a green investment, bankers are shying away from as having too much government risk. And as a result, no matter what the profit is to be made from pulling oil out of the ground, the people who actually punch the holes, can't get the financing to do the wells. And that is the lesson that Biden administration learned from Obama. Under Obama, we had extremely high oil prices. And what happened were the oil people, particularly the wildcatters like Harold Hamm from Continental Resources, went out and said, well, we're going to start using hydraulic fracturing. It didn't make sense at $60 a barrel, but it makes sense at 80. And so they started hydraulic fracturing, and they learned how to do it, and they became better and better at it. And it really revolutionized the amount of oil that we have here in America and domestically. It just created a massive amount of new oil that we could actually get to. We could actually pull out of the ground. And we became not only having almost as much oil as we consumed, but we also became the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. We became the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and within 4 years of that, we were exporting. We were the number one exporter of liquefied natural gas to Europe. In fact, I think we're the number one exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world, although I could be wrong on that. So we've had a massive expansion in terms of our ability, our natural gas fields, but we can't punch new holes there because you also need pipeline. So you not only need the financing, but you need pipeline. You need the infrastructure to get the oil or the natural gas from the field to the distribution center to the refinery. And when you start killing pipelines, as Joe Biden has aggressively done, and you don't encourage new pipeline growth, and we've had diminution of new pipeline growth under Biden that's been devastating. That's why you end up with not being able to use your domestic oil supplies. And that's what the Biden administration has done to make it so you don't have a virtuous cycle kicked off by new technologies being learned, exploited, and so we can pull more oil, more natural gas out of the ground in a more safe, efficient, and environmentally friendly way. So that's the inflation. He has policies which have created inflation. He ignored inflation when it could have done something about it, and now we're going to see a wage inflation spiral. That's going to be a wage price spiral that's going to be, going to exacerbate the problem. And plus next month, we'll see the full effect of the Russia oil ban and other actions have been taken where we'll see the real effect of that. And you'll see inflation up in the 8s, pretty much guaranteed. So that's inflation. Joe Biden doesn't recognize that he did anything to cause it. He doesn't recognize that spending too much money is really one of the root causes of it, and he's not willing to engage in any energy policies that would actually relieve one of the primary drivers of inflation. That's high energy costs. So all in all, Joe Biden is the inflation president. He owns it, he embraces it, and he wants inflation, particularly energy inflation, because the objective of the Biden administration is to make energy that we have in abundance so expensive that energy that's expensive, electric vehicles and like, seem cheap. That's their objective. That's what they're doing. And let's just not let them fool us and say, it's a Putin's inflation. That's just a lie. And, I'm sick of them lying. I'm sick of them not telling the truth. If they actually just don't care about inflation and this is part of their policy, they just lay it out. To say we want high energy prices because we want to force you to buy electric vehicles. That's the truth. That's what they're trying to do. And so, folks, if you don't like it, well, we just need to change people who are in office. And that means Congress. Now, let's talk about what Congress is doing about inflation, because Congress is just is culpable as well, because Congress keeps passing spending bills that are out of balance, and they don't really seem to care about the fact that we're running massive deficits. The House of Representatives just passed yesterday a spending bill that increases spending in the 1.5 to 1.5 trillion dollars, 1.4 trillion before, for defense and guns and butter side of the equation. All the rest of the spending, by the way, is on mandatory programs, so-called mandatory programs like Social Security, Medicare, and the like. And so the Congress actually, when they talk about the government shutdown, they're only really voting on about 30 to 33% of the entire spending of the federal government. So food stamps is on autopilot. All those welfare is on autopilot. Although they did reauthorize the welfare program without telling anybody about it during the vote last night from the House. So they're only really dealing with about a third of the amount of money the federal government spends. So they've passed something for 1.5 trillion. Here's what it has. Here's what it doesn't have. It doesn't have a border wall. It doesn't have any solutions in terms of immigration. It is essentially saying ignores immigration. Let me be clear. The funding bill is the only time the Republicans actually have a chance to enact any policy, to force any changes, because to pass a funding bill, the Democrats need 60 votes in the Senate. This bill was negotiated by the Senate leadership and the House leadership. Okay, that means that the Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell, Richard Shelby, Senator Shelby from Alabama, in particular, negotiated this bill, and their whole goal was to not have a government shutdown, not have any discord. Well, folks, if you're not going to, you don't get to pontificate about the open borders when you're not willing to fight about them on the one thing you can do to fight about it. They could have demanded and had forced the wall to be finished. They could have done that. They could have demanded that Biden follow the law as it relates to return to Mexico policy, but they didn't. They have lots of things they could have put in this because Congress holds the power of the purse. They have the capacity to tell the executive branch exactly what they have to do with no wiggle room, and yet they didn't. Another thing that we've been fighting hard on, and I know you guys have been following, the House bill, which was negotiated by the Senate again, didn't have vax mandates, didn't have a defund of the vax mandates. So it funds the vaccination mandates, even as the kind of the iron curtain of COVID is being pulled down around the country. We still have the federal government would be funding vaccination mandates, costing people, threatening people's jobs, threatening their livelihoods, threatening their lives if they're not vaccinated. This affects our military. Gee whiz, we're sitting there in the midst of crisis in terms of Taiwan. We've got a crisis in Ukraine. We've got a crisis with pressure on Israel and Saudi Arabia through attacks that are going on continuously. We've got a crisis in Venezuela where there's a potential war between Venezuela and Colombia. We have so many crises around the world that are all being fomented by the Iranian terrorist squads. But we've got those crises going on, and yet we're going to sit there and we're going to fire some of our best people in the military. We're going to purge them out of the military because they're not vaccinated. That's what this is doing. That's why what the Republicans aren't standing up for when they're insisting on defunding the vaccination mandates. And so there's no defund of the vaccination mandates. Now, the good news is Senator Lee is going to, from Utah, Mike Lee, great guy. And if you live in Utah, help him. But Senator Mike Lee has been fighting the vaccination mandates tooth and nail. And he's fighting to have an amendment between now and March 15th when the Senate has to get something done, unless they pass another deadline extension. He's going to put a bill in. He's got an amendment in to eliminate the vaccination mandates. And, here's the dirty little secret once again. The Republicans had the votes to do that in the CR, in the continuing resolution, except for they were essentially, they didn't show up. We lost 46-47 on a similar vote 3 weeks ago because the leadership didn't want it to pass. That's just the truth. And so we lost 46-47 as three of our members left, and the Democrats held firm. So that's that's the sad story of what actually happened. It's our hope that with this omnibus that there will be a little more openness by Senate Republican leadership to allow this amendment to succeed. And so that's your number one. Mike Lee's got that amendment. Rand Paul has an amendment which would defund the mask mandates. We see mask mandates being lifted all over America, yet they're still going to force people when they're flying on airplanes to wear masks and the like. So Rand Paul is doing that. Senator from Kentucky, who's been fighting hard along a lot of the aspects of COVID, been one of the real heroes in terms of taking on Dr. Anthony Fauci and some of the lies and shiftiness that he's engaged in. So Rand Paul's been a stud on this, and he's looking to offer that. And so there's going to be a fight over it. Remains to be seen what's going to happen. If you want to get involved, if you've already been involved, you do it again. If you want to let other people get involved, just go to getliberty.org. That's our website, getliberty.org. And click the button. There it says Stop Vaccine Mandates, and send an email to your senator, to your two senators, and your one member of Congress. And it's real easy. It's just a simple, little form you got to fill out and push a button, and it goes. So that's something you can do right now. It's something you have your friends do. So that's what we have in terms of the government funding bill. Some of the, there's other disappointments here. Oh, they also increased COVID spending. There was a fight in terms of the House and in the House the COVID spending was being, part of it was being offset by people saying, oh, some money hadn't been sent to the states yet. And as a result, that they were going to use that money and reroute it to the new COVID spending that Biden is pushing. And the Democrats revolted over that. And because while states like California and New York had gotten all their COVID spending, states like Michigan and elsewhere hadn't gotten the second pot of money. And so a lot of Democrats said, no, we can't do that. We didn't collect all the money that we wanted to collect. And so consequently, we now have, they went back to the drawing board. And so the COVID spending is going to be more expensive because they're not going to move some of the money that had been unspent over to cover what the current supposed needs are. What else? We did see the return of earmarks. This is the first budget bill that has earmarks since the Republicans got rid of them about 10 years ago. So all sorts of interesting things have gotten earmarks. It's just, you're looking at everything from different local museums to just, it's just the constant drumbeat of this junk. It's about $4 billion of earmarks is what they're looking at. 60% of them went to Democrat districts. And it's essentially just saying, oh, we're gonna help the National Institute for Fern Growth get funding, and this is it's what Congress does and it's how they quite honestly buy votes. They say, hey, you want to get something done in your district, you want to have your local junior college, city county, community college get a grant for something. Well, then you better vote for the bill, because we'll put the grant in if you vote for it. We'll take it out if you're not going to. So it's one of it's the way Congress is very transactional on this. One of the great disappointments of the House vote was that 39 House Republicans voted in favor of the domestic spending side of the bill. And in doing so, they voted in favor of vax mandates. They voted in favor of or against any new spending on the wall. They voted in favor of the bill has a provision that doesn't allow importing oil from Russia. And that's really, polls really well, so they did it. A lot of the Republicans were very concerned because they said, wait a second, we're not going to import oil from Russia. Well, how are we offsetting that? Are we going to get it from Iran? Are we going to get it from Venezuela? Or are we going to get it from domestic production? What's being done in that bill to help ensure that we have increased domestic production? What's being done to take the boot off the neck of the financiers who are being told in no uncertain term based on the law and the regulations that are being passed that they should not be loaning money to drill oil wells? And so what's being done? Well, the answer was nothing. There was a whole list of things that should have been done, including build the Keystone XL pipeline, and that didn't end up in the bill. So a lot of Republicans voted against it for that. But those 39 Republicans who voted for it, they supported a massive budget increase, about almost 7%. They supported not dealing with any of the real problems that are going on, and they've ceded their authority, their power of the purse, over to the Democrats. And I just say shame on them. It's the list is available, and we'll put something up on the web in terms of who they are. But it's just despicable. So we're going to go to the Senate. We're going to have a fight. Join the fight. Help us push those senators. If we can get, if everybody shows up, it's a 50-50 vote. But we just need to try to make certain that 50 Republicans vote the right way. And if there's only 49 Democrats there, then we can put the amendment on, and the House will then have to fight it out and determine whether or not they're going to want to have vax mandates being gotten rid of, the mask mandates gotten rid of. Let's pass it in the Senate and shove it back over the House and make Nancy Pelosi deal with it, because that's kind of actually what the Democrats would do. So let's actually force the Republicans to start acting. They not just voting like Democrats, but actually acting like Democrats by insisting that their priorities get funded as well, or defunded, such as the case may be. So that's where we're at. That's the situation with our budget, with the current spending bill. It's gonna be a wild weekend on it, but get involved. It's I know a lot of you repeatedly contacted your members. Right now, contacting your senators and just telling them to vote no on the omnibus, and vote yes on the vax mandate, on ending the vax mandate, defunding the vax mandate. And if they won't defund the vax mandate, if they won't defund the mask mandate, then vote against the omnibus at all costs, because ultimately they have to listen to you, because guess what? If they can't get 60 senators, they can't pass the bill. So they need 10 Republican votes. I don't know who those 10 Republicans are that they're going to get. What I do know is if you don't contact your senators, there's limited chance that your senators are going to be one of the ones who stand up and say, no, I'm not voting for something that leaves in place one of the greatest federal overreaches in the history of our country, with a law that reached down into the HR departments of corporations across America and said, I don't want this person to have a job. A law which does this with federal contractors, it's doing it in our military, it's doing it amongst the federal workforce. And they attempted to do it down to about 90 million Americans through an OSHA regulation, which has been withdrawn. But the fact is, Congress needs to say that they can't do it at all, that Biden can't do it at all, because unless they do, they will in the future. It's time for Congress to stand up and do their freaking job. And with that, I should probably have said that. So anyway, we'll just wish you well. Have a great rest of the day, and yay, Major League Baseball's back, and maybe the Angels will get some pitching. With that, have a great day.